I spend my life researching and teaching people how to live a powerful life. I am a believer. I stand for the transformation of humanity. I have found my purpose. My name is Gabrielle McGee, and I am the Rebellious Therapist. And welcome to my Rebellious Therapist podcast. And I also want to welcome Ciara, which is part of How To series. And Ciara is someone that I've been mentoring for the last few years and has got a lot to offer. And we're going to have a conversation today. And it's all about conflict in relationships. Now, this is something I've worked in the last with hundreds of people. And it's something within the work I do that I work a lot with people figuring out, number one, and also getting the tools on how to deal with conflict and their style of dealing with conflict. Now, we cannot avoid conflict because we live with human beings, right? And there's different types of conflict, but we also have an internal system of how we deal with conflict. So we're going to look at all that today. So welcome, Ciara. Thank you.
Hello.
And
How are
I'm
you?
going to ask you, how is things today in New York?
Great. Excited again for
Yes.
this week 2.
Yes, thank you.
Loved last week's episode, so I'm just excited to see what comes up this week because I know personally I'm in the space
Yeah.
right now of managing conflict
Yes.
with somebody in my life.
Mhm.
So I'm definitely going to learn something. I can offer some real life
Great.
experience,
Mhm.
and hopefully we can connect and relate to people who are listening. And that's really the idea, isn't it? Again, like you said, we're not here to tell you to avoid conflict, but it's also managing and navigating it
Totally.
within all parts of our lives.
Beautiful. So conflict is something that we've learned as we've grown how to manage. So we usually learn that from what I call the family system. So family systems it's like there's an agreement within the family. Sometimes mom will resolve conflict different to what dad does. Sometimes the both parents will have the same process of dealing with conflict, but whatever you've been brought up with and how to deal with it is one of those systems. It will be something that you've learned to do.
Mhm.
So a lot of times, sometimes the genders are very different in conflict.
Mhm.
So what you'll find is men are more reactive in conflict because they're the protectors. They're they're out there. They have to protect their families, so they're more vocal, or they're more the boys on the playground. What they do is they sort of get into the playground. There might be a bit of conflict. They go there, they bang it out, and then it's over.
Yeah.
So they've learned at a very young age how to sort of survive in the world and how to deal with certain conflicts in their life. That's their first social sort of training ground. Then we've got the girls. The girls react completely different, where they're very withdrawn most of the time, right? And very silent, and they sulk, and they get, judgmental. And so there's a lot of different processes for the girls in the playground. So they stop talking to each other. They start becoming like into groups and little trends and stuff. So now we've got the girls, and it's not something that we give our women permission to do. It's to be very vocal, or like girls can't be angry.
Mhm.
But a lot of girls within conflict cry.
Yeah. Me.
Yes. So
Straight away.
that's something you've learned. So that and we'll talk about that as we go along, what that crying process is within conflict, right? But you probably
Yeah.
learned that some part of family, you've inherited some of the behavior, right? But also, then you go to the playground and you've really now starting to practice how to be around conflict and how to deal with conflict and how to, you know, a lot of girls cry because then they get the attention. That's how they communicate that they're upset, or
Well, in
they're
real time right now, I'm having a memory of my mum and her father having a fight and her crying.
yes,
And then
very good.
me seeing her cry made
Yeah,
me sad.
yeah,
And then when I would be fighting with my dad growing up,
mm,
I just immediately go to crying.
yes. So you can see the pattern already, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. And also, children have, you know, a system where there's a mirror neurons in the brain. So it's that
Mhm.
thing where monkey see, monkey do, right?
Mhm.
We've always heard the term. Well, the mirror neurons is watching mom and how she resolves conflict with dad. So now you've got to learn behavior because that's your reference point as a
That's kind
child.
of a breakthrough for me right now.
Wow. Amazing. Oh, cool.
That's really interesting, and the reason why I say that and be very transparent about
Yeah.
it is because that's how it can that how this is how this works.
Yes.
The awareness.
The awareness
It's
and yeah,
the tying
absolutely.
back the tying back to your past,
Mhm.
seeing what it looked like and how it applies now. And
Amazing.
I think the journey that I'm on right now is I'm finding my voice in conflict so that I don't
Yes.
just cry straight away
Yes. Very good.
because that's a learned behavior.
Wow.
Um, I I had a difficult conversation with an important person in my life 2 nights ago when I started choking up.
Mm.
But that's not a bad thing, but
No,
it's not because you're like you say, activated, it's not really where something's gonna get resolved.
very good. And I and
So
and that's a very good example of how continues on getting, you know, presented as a process for you in conflict.
yeah.
Even though you've learned it, like, what's your first memory of, how old were you when you remember your mom crying when she was having
I couldn't even tell you.
if you were to
Um,
guess?
I wanna say, like, between 7 and 12,
Mm,
and it's just such a flash. I
yes,
remember where she was. I couldn't see him because he was upstairs, but
yes.
I was just watching her,
Mm,
and it's just, like, yeah,
wow,
it's a core memory.
yeah. And a lot of times when I talk to girls about, a lot of times they start crying, but it's actually rage. What I call,
Mm,
what I call, and this is my term, crying rage for women.
mhm,
And what happens is, if you want to really process and learn how to um, deal with conflict, you've got to deal with that rage first of all, but absolutely not. That has to be taken to the side, and you got to learn and figure out. And I know a lot of times you'll hear people that's work with me. I say, get your boxing gloves on,
mhm,
get your punch bag up, and let's go. And
mhm,
untrain that habit of falling into tears. And because what happens, you become a victim
mhm, yeah,
of the process, right? You're not a
yes.
victim, but you actually, the emotional process takes you to victim and helpless.
And I think it's important as well that, like, if I'm in a conflict with somebody else, there's always 2 people.
Mm,
If I start to cry,
mm,
that's going to elicit a reaction on the other side as well. Not that that's bad or good,
mm,
but then they have to shift their way because I'm crying and I look like I'm the victim and they're not. And does that make sense? That it's like,
totally.
well, if Kira's crying,
Mm,
I must be the baddie. And I sometimes like that happens in
mhm,
my life right now because I
mhm.
cry straight away,
Yeah.
especially when I have hard conversations with people. And then do they essentially have to pull back and shut down because now Kira is the one that's activated? Does
Yes.
that make
Oh,
sense?
total sense. But also, if it's a male, like if it's in a relationship, usually the man gets really, really pissed off
Yeah.
because now he's starting to feel bad, right? First of all,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
he's responsible. And what that brings up is this mommy stuff.
Mm.
So there's a lot of transference and projection goes on at that point whenever, that sort of process is going on between in a romantic relationship for couples. And then doesn't get resolved as you say, it sort of continues on, and that's then starts how you resolve conflict, which doesn't get resolved.
And that's what, like you said, patterns and behaviors, that's where
Mhm.
that starts.
Mm. So it's great. It's great to see that. It's great that you see, that you've already mentioned that you started to find a voice in there rather than go to tearful part, right?
Yeah. And
Because
again, there's nothing wrong with tears, there's nothing
no,
wrong with crying. That's a automatic reaction and
mm,
response to what's happening to you. It's just kind of knowing that in that reactionary state, it's not the most productive place to try and resolve
exactly.
something.
So the thing is, if you're crying, then you're no, you're if you're crying at a point where you're really what you want to be is angry, then there is a problem. There is an issue,
Yeah.
right? Nothing wrong with it, but that's not going to give you access to getting anything resolved within yourself.
Frustration,
It's
all that.
all of it. So then you're taking yourself in there and you're not coming out of it. And then the next session that you have within your relationship, then you've lost, first of all, you've lost trust in yourself to get it resolved. And he's
Mm.
also, if it's a man or woman, whatever, you know, that other person is now accepting how this is gonna go. So you now
Yeah, and it's
teach your
like
environment,
you come with the tears and then and then when you don't get it resolved, you add a layer of frustration, a layer of anger, and this
Mhm.
just keeps building and building and building, and then it's like,
And if you watch women in that state, they usually sulk and give
yeah.
the silent sort of treatment. That's how they communicate. That's a communication. The thing is, then you've set up a pattern in the relationship and how you resolve conflict, which is not resolving conflict, right? So it's really useful, to acknowledge. Okay, so how do no? My style is very different to you. I'm not crying. I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I'm going to tackle it. Right. So, if you're a man in a relationship with me and you don't like conflict, then you're gonna disappear. You're gonna shrink.
You're gonna get triggered.
You're gone, baby. Or if you're a guy, who will meet you there in conflict, right? Then it gets
Yeah.
really like it's a really tough space to operate from.
Yeah.
But I will stand my ground because I can tell you now, I will not back down. Obviously
And I think
within the
actually
safety.
while we're here, and I think we were supposed to say that at the start, let's just, we're not talking about violence here. We're not
No,
talking
no,
about abuse.
no, no, no.
None of that. That's definitely a more complex and extreme
No, no,
level of
we're
conflict
that's a
that requires
completely different
support and
totally.
help. What we're talking about
Mhm,
is a difference of opinion,
mhm,
a disagreement,
correct.
trying to get your point across, if you're
Absolutely.
trying to ask for a need or a want to be
Mhm,
met,
mhm,
and then it's causing some sort of friction.
mm.
This is here what we're talking
Very
about
good.
today. So
Perfect.
just to not confuse
Yes, of
that.
course, thank you so much, right? It's very important to say that, Kira.
Yeah.
It's defining the moment just, in relationship in that point of conflict where how do you resolve it, right?
Yeah.
So what I want to say is none of those two states is resolving any type of conflict.
Yeah.
We're also, I'm as stuck as you in there, even though, me sort of standing and coming forward because it's the three stages in conflict. It's fight, flight, or freeze. Most of the time, I will come back. I'll think about it, but I'll come back if I don't agree. That's a given. It's a natural space for me to be operating from. Now, I've learned through the years and learned through, my time as being a therapist and through the training that most of the time now I don't react. So I've gone the opposite. I stand back Actually, silence for me is one of my useful tools because of how I resolve conflict is by, I'll go in there and I'll stand there with you. I'll challenge. My opinion will be very strong. So I've had to learn the opposite to what you might have to. You've had to find your voice. I've had to learn how to step back, be more silent, to process it, and then come back at it at a stage where the nervous system's my nervous system's calmed down, but so is the other person. Now, here's one. What I want to say: it takes 20 minutes for the nervous system to calm down. So, in the
Interesting.
moments of conflict, never go at conflict when everyone's so high within that sort of process. Let everything
And I think
let everything
in the last
breathe.
in the last episode we talked about a heightened nervous system. So
Yeah,
if you haven't listened to that, maybe it's
go
like
back and
important to
listen.
understand what
Totally
what a heightened nervous system is, how
correct.
to calm it down.
Yes.
That will lead into then, like you said,
Yeah. Perfect.
a nice
Yeah.
place, a productive place for conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. A more empowering sort of process, right? And it's really
Yes.
great because I haven't thought about this till I started this conversation about the two different processes of mine is very different. I've had to untrain myself. No, it was never violence. It's not that type of, approach we're talking about, but I'm talking about, what, look, if someone, is coming to me in a state where I don't agree with or, I find it offensive, I'm gonna say, "I'm sorry." But I've learned more and more to go back to that process when everything's calmed down.
Mhm.
So where with you, where you go into the more sort of upset and crying, where you start now to find your voice rather than choose to go into the young age behavior.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is one really sort of trained process that we've got to untrain what we've learned growing up and use a process that's going to be of more value to me
Yeah.
and more value to
And this
you.
is why we spend so much time on the awareness side of it.
Yes.
Like identifying what it is.
Mm.
I think definitely a main goal for us in for me and you in this podcast, we've talked about this, is
Hmm.
not to give unrealistic like top 5 tips to avoid
Yes.
conflict or to
Yeah.
manage conflict. We're not going to give you a 1 to 5. It's like life and being a human being is way more complex and layered than that.
Agree.
Hence why we go to the child,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
what you saw when you were growing up, and with that hopefully spark some sort of breakthrough like I just had
Yes.
earlier in this, that you can then learn about yourself, hold yourself accountable, take responsibility,
Hmm.
and show up in a more empowered way in your
Correct.
life.
Yes.
And with the example being this episode is how to manage and navigate
Yeah.
conflict.
And resolve, right?
Resolve, yeah.
Yeah. So what I want to say is what I think is really interesting is in the ideal world, right? Inside of conflict. And I spent 2 years in a construction company, and and it's full of men, like it's hundreds of men, right, in this company. And one of the things that they find in that industry, it's very common that there's a lot of conflict and men not acting out. Everyone's really really activated whenever when they get highly stressed or you know just things, even things at home, they bring it to work and then they act out their conflict, and usually men go to fight conflict. Not every man, but that's a normal way that they've learned in the playground how to resolve stuff. So we started bringing in some, and I think you can use this process in any part of your life. You can do it in relationships, but it's a trained process. So we brought in we first of all we trained everyone within the organization and how to approach a situation if there's conflict involved. So we were giving them options. So first of all, I went right through the whole process from the person who was on the shovel, no, on the ground, doing the groundwork to management systems, all everything. We trained everything up in one system, right? And how so first of all, if there was a point of conflict that people would not react, they would come away from it. That was the agreement right through. Then they would go away and they would consider it, they would think about it and see what's the issue for them. And then what happens within that, they've got to come up with 2 solutions before they approach the person that they're in conflict with or the situation. So now I'm already got a conflict with you, Ciara, example, right? But I've already thought a lot about what I want, how I want to resolve it, or the issues that need resolved. So the conflict doesn't become about you; it becomes about the issue. That's really important distinction, right? And that's a more important distinction for you than it is for me at that point.
Mhm.
And I'm now coming with 2 solutions for that particular point, right, of conflict. The really interesting part is, right, and this is where it's really powerful, and I think this is a really powerful one for relationships, that you also understand if I'm coming to talk to you about any issue I have, that I am coming with 2 solutions, not with attack.
Yeah.
So you already don't have to go into your fight, flight, or freeze natural process within the conflict. So your system, you don't have to go into your natural way of dealing with conflict.
So defense or protection or
All of it.
all of that.
All of it. Right?
Survival.
Survival. It's all survival, right? So now I have an agreement. So I'm coming to you, Ciara. So you also know you've got some confidence and trust now in the conversation. You know you're not going to get attacked. You know I'm coming
Yes.
with solutions, and you know I'm also coming to listen to your view. Now, what happened was in the organization, which health and safety is a big issue, health and safety rose by 100%. The gossip, the complaining, and the chaos completely disappeared. Because what happened was we were saying to people, look, if there's conflict and you're joining the conflict, then you're part of it. If you're listening to it or you're agreeing with it, so people to keep that in place, then you're going home at night with that, and your stress levels
Yeah.
going through the roof. So people started to understand the benefits of going by the systems we were put in place. Now, what happened was the projects were getting was getting they were moving on the projects much quicker, which was saving the company a lot more money. The health and safety had completely gone up through the roof. The gossip had stopped. So we had these guys on the ground saying, instead of them saying, would you do that for, or you shouldn't have done that. And the other guy would be reacting saying, oh, bugger off, or, stronger language. It was, oh, sorry, mate. Or, oh, do you want any help with that? Or do you mind helping me? And the other one was saying, no problem. So it was a complete change and flip around from what it was before I arrived there.
Amazing.
And it was amazing to watch, what was really interesting for me, because a lot of times I get the conversation and I don't agree with is, oh, it'll be hard to get men to do that. Actually, men
Mhm.
are really great. Once they find a solution, they're very good at, at really jumping in and going with it.
Step by step.
So then a lot of times I will bring that into couple therapy, or, so say like friend groups.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a recipe. Now it takes a lot of skill, takes a lot of
Yeah.
understanding how you operate, and takes a lot of training and processing. But to me, if you want to, in the ideal world, get a system in that you can resolve conflict within your relationship or within the workplace, that's my recommendation. Because
Yeah.
I seen it work so well, and I know it
Yeah.
works.
So I have a question,
Yes.
just to go back to the you know, so you do the work on this side. So there's two parts.
Mm,
There's two people in a conflict. You do all the work on this side. You bring the two solutions.
mm.
L- it- is it right now that you actually have to hold space for the other person
Mhm.
to then come to this agreement with you? So it's not necessarily once you're ready with the two solutions
Mhm.
that automatically the other side is going to be like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Correct.
What is it's important to, like, I think, hold space, or
Mm.
you have to understand this is just your side of it, and then say your significant other or your friend or your mother, your father, your sister, your brother,
Mm.
you have to let them now decide what's like how they're going to show up.
Correct. So what I would say to you is, first of all, that's why you do not react in the moment.
Hmm.
That's why you got to sort of what what I call park it for a while. And secondly, you set the person up properly.
Yeah.
You set the process up properly. You really set the person down and say, look, I want to talk to you about something. And I also have a couple of solutions here and I want you to really, know, listen to. And I'm also willing to hear what your thoughts are on that. And hopefully we come in somewhere in the middle so we can get something resolved here. So that already needs to set up.
Yeah.
You just don't come with solutions and not let the person know because they're not going to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And also, it's like you've got to be willing to let your opinion and being right about something go and come to some, mutual ground where it works for both. Now,
Yeah.
also, numbers. The first question I'd have for someone is: are you invested in getting this resolved? Is it worth it for
Yes.
you? Is the other person, you know, do you think they're going to be willing to step into that process with you? Is it worth it for them? So there's loads of stuff you got to consider before you even approach the conversation.
Yeah.
It has to be. There's a huge investment in getting it resolved as well, and you have to be mindful. Look, if you're in conflict, it's really eating up a lot of your energy and it's wasting a lot of time. So it's worth going through the process to really get it resolved and get it complete.
Well, that's what was most recent in my life.
Yeah.
We were wasting a lot of time.
Mm.
And me and a person that's important to me in my life,
Yeah.
we were getting nothing resolved
Mm.
until we finally got, support. And
Yes.
really, kind of what I learned in that is that we have two different languages.
Yes.
Like, they're speaking one, I'm speaking another, and it's in here how we actually like understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we had to really work on our communication styles.
Very
For
good.
me, I would go into shutting
Mm.
them down. And I think what because I didn't
Dominating.
want to hear it.
So that's dominating, right? So you're going to start dominating and controlling
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear an attack on my personality, or I didn't want to hear
Yeah.
any like, I wasn't willing to take responsibility for it because I was right and I know best.
Mm.
And I really had to unlearn that and give that up. And in that, what I learned is to kind of get curious to actually what the other person is
Correct.
saying.
Yeah.
Because what they might be saying is not actually what they're meaning. It's
What
just
you're
learning
hearing
their
is might
style of
yeah, exactly.
communication.
Right. So what you're hearing might not be what they're saying
Exactly.
because
And it's the most
it's so
complicated
loaded.
thing ever.
It's actually so loaded because first of all, it's your interpretation of what you're hearing,
Yeah.
right? But also it's what they're saying. It might not be what's going on behind the scene and what they want to communicate. And that's where again she says the most complex in that point, in that moment. It's so complex.
Because what I'm interpreting in that moment is based on my past experiences, my past patterns, my past behaviors, my
Totally.
past relationships. So
Survival.
it's until survival. So it's until I unlearn that, clear the slate,
Mhm.
clear a blank slate. Okay, we're dealing with this and this and this, and
Yeah.
what you're saying. And it's just tender, and really need to approach with caution. And again, I wouldn't have been able to do that unless the other person was willing to sit there and
Exactly.
hold that
You
space.
got to.
So, what would you say to people who kind of, get shut down from
Yeah.
the other side, or again, is it a communication style? Is it learning that from the other side, from the other
Yeah,
person, or how would you navigate that?
yeah. I think there has to be a willingness of on both ends to listen, right? Because if you constantly going into some situation where the other one's completely forever shutting down, then that process is never going to work because it can't, because you're not being heard and not getting
Yeah.
resolved, right? Now you were doing that, but now you've decided, you're going to do something different. Now there's a
Mhm.
situation in the relationship where it can be resolved. But if you
It's really hard.
constantly do that, it does so much damage to the relationship. You're losing the relationship. You're going down the wrong route.
Yeah.
I don't
100%.
think you build a tolerance for somebody shutting you down all the time.
No.
I don't think that works. But if you want, I think both ends have to work on their conflict style, especially in a relationship. You're going to be in that relationship, should be friendship or whatever, even at work, for a long time, for so many hours, so many, you years. So you got to figure this stuff out if you really
What
want a great
what if you
relationship and a
don't
great life.
understand where the other person is coming from? What if you just cannot grasp?
Then, at some moment you got to be complete with not knowing.
Okay.
You got to come to peace at some point. Well, I have no idea where that's coming from, and sometimes you won't, because it will be
Right.
it could be sort of back in a very young age. They could be triggered back to their childhood, and it might not be much about the present moment. A lot of times, it's not about the present moment. So then you're going to get lost in there. You're going to get confused, and then maybe just the more you understand, okay, this is something that's going on over there with them. And I've done everything from my end to try to understand or try to reach out or try to, resolve. Then you gotta let go. Gotta let go and say, right, I see at this point, I not I'm not gonna be able to resolve this situation for them over there.
And at that point, would you go as far as to say that again, I'm probably trying to manipulate and control the situation to the way I want it to
Hmm.
be? But like, if I can't understand somebody else's perspective or can't grasp it, is there sort of like a control element there where, well, I need to understand this? Does that make sense?
Yes. I think that's where the controlling part comes in.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do need to understand, sometimes you don't.
Okay. So it's kind of just giving it up.
It's but there's a point where you give up, and there's a point where you
Yeah.
don't give up, and that's where you're gonna have to work much more clear from your end. You gotta figure this stuff out from your end where you're at. So you're basically a lot of times you're watching yourself a lot more than you're watching the other person, where you're coming from.
Yeah. Because if you are watching the other person, you're going to get nothing resolved.
Well, if you're watching the other person, just you're out there blaming or judging
Yeah.
and all that, then it's never gonna get resolved because that's what they've got coming. The energy of that will they'll pick it up. They'll pick that up and they'll also not have a space to resolve anything or get heard.
Yeah. And isn't it a very important part of, resolving conflict or managing, navigating it is active listening?
Yes.
That's kind of what when I was doing my research or listening and all that,
Mhm.
like listening to the podcast, they say it like active listening.
Mm.
Listening is so important
Yeah,
in conflict.
yeah. And
What would
a
you
lot
say
of
about that?
yeah, a lot of and a lot of the things the times that I do my seminars, my retreats, we don't s we don't start anything without teaching people where to listen from. So, as you say, active listening is something that can really resolve so much so quickly. And what does that mean is you give up your opinion, you give up, giving advice, you give up trying to do judgment, and just really listen for where that person's coming from.
You kind of like, you don't listen to respond, which is what we do a lot.
Exactly.
Even in this interaction here with me and you, like
Mm.
there's a lot of active listening.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm not jumping in, I'm holding space for you to finish and
Yeah.
all that. So and we're not in conflict given that, but
Yeah.
it's probably a little bit harder in conflict because you're probably a little bit more
Mm.
reactive.
See, one of the things that we do have to remember, conflict's not easy. No,
Yes.
it's not a nice process or not an easy process. But we've got to have our, game on and know where we're navigating ourselves and navigating the conflict when we're in it. If we want to get it resolved, that's a learning process. We have not been taught that as human beings.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question
Yes.
that I think might be like of value. What's your opinion on bickering in
Mm,
relationships? Because I know from my experience that what I had to go to therapy with my significant other to resolve was the smallest
mm.
problem. That if we did not
Yes.
kind of
Very good.
get that,
Yeah.
it was going to like it's kind of like a crack in a
Yeah.
windscreen. It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Next thing, it's
Correct.
going to shatter.
Mhm.
So
Very good.
how like what kind of information
Mm.
would you say that bickering can hold for a relationship? Because I know a lot of people bicker. It's just a thing, but what's kind of the deeper root of it?
Yeah. Very, very. Actually, thank you for asking that. Bickering is a very submissive way of being really pissed off with someone and not actually dealing with it. So it's like, to me, bickering can be really exhausting in a relationship. So you keep on sort of like digging them from the side, kicking them, and not really, putting the stuff on the table and really looking at what's going on and why am I, what am I pissed off about, basically.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to communicate. But both people are in the same position. They're taking the same they're doing the same thing in the relationship. One bickers, the other one bickers back, and it's all survival patterns, right? Instead of really looking at the deeper core issue and see what's in the relationship that stuff's showing up, or is this a habit I'm bringing to the relationship? Is this a communication style when I'm pissed off about stuff? So I think it's amazing that you went such an early stage to get that stuff resolved within the relationship, because that can build and break and burn and crash a relationship without people even knowing where it started. So I want to say to you, congratulations. And that's where the benefits of knowing yourself well enough, doing the work well enough, and doing everything you've done in all the years you've been doing this work, that you now have resolved something within the relationship that could be a massive problem 1 or 2 years down the line.
Yeah. And now, like, just to be real, 2 nights ago, I sent a bickering message, and
Did you
it's
delete it?
nearly it's written and sent before you realize what you've done. And I'm just like, but again, it's like I have to just pull back in that moment and know that, okay, maybe apologize if needs be,
Exactly.
or
Apologize.
understand where
Get
I was coming
responsible.
from.
Yeah.
Look, it's not that this is fully resolved now. I constantly have to come up against myself all the time,
Mm.
especially when you're in a relationship with
Mhm.
anybody. Um, and it's just kind of putting the best version of yourself forward with a united kind of goal at the end of it, which is to have a healthy relationship.
And what's really interesting is, like, we're all human. We've all got our shit going on and we all act out, right? So we have
Mhm.
to declare that we're human beings. So what you do is, if you've done something like that, you go back as quick as you can and get responsible, apologize, and move on. And make
Yeah.
sure the other person's complete. And
Yeah.
as you said, like, you're still doing it. You're doing it with awareness, you know?
Yes.
So at least with the awareness, you can go back and you can take responsibility for it, which is
Yeah.
absolutely all you can do. Trust me. Which is really a great example, Kira. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Love
Yeah.
that.
So, as I say again, this is how to serious. So hopefully, this talk will be educational for people. Will get people awareness. It will get them sort of started on a journey, or get them thinking on their in relationships. Maybe bring some tips to the relationship, or some tips for the conflict. And you know, thanks for listening. And thank you,
Yes.
Kira.
And if you have any questions on anything,
Yeah.
please send them through on Gabrielle's
The Rebellious
Instagram
Therapist.
page,
Yeah.
and we will make sure to take note.
Yeah,
And because
absolutely.
this is a lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
We're not trying to solve the world in one day. We're
No.
just trying to spread awareness, share knowledge in the hope that it will be of value to somebody
Yeah.
to impact their life just that 1% more.
Yeah. Thank you. So thank you all for listening, and until the next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. See you next week.
See you, Ciara. Thank you. You've been listening to the Rebellious Therapist podcast. For more information, you can follow me, the Rebellious Therapist, on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can find further information on my website, therebellioustherapist.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.